Have you ever felt like you were not learning as well as you could, or maybe even that you're getting worse instead of improving your skills? If so, this video will help you to understand why it happens and see that actually it's not a terrible thing, it's just part of the learning process. This is episode 65 for Learn and Become podcast. My name is Andre, and I'll be talking to you about the 4 stages on the learning process. Before we get started, the name of our podcast is Learn and Become, because we believe that in order for you to become something, you have to learn. But if you're just learning, like receiving new information, but you're not being transformed somehow, so it's not very effective. It's one thing you always have to observe, one thing you always have to think about when you are learning something. Is it transforming you? Is it helping you to become a better person? If it is, that's awesome. That's the goal. But if it's not, you should think about it. You should consider changing something in your learning process in order for it to actually affect who you are in your future outcomes. Today, we'll be talking about these 4 states or the 4 stages or the 4 steps, the 4 parts of the learning process or of competence. And it is really interesting because we usually, or at least that's something I used to think that learning was just like a constant line, just something that happened like with a beginning and an end, that just starts here, it goes straight all the way, and then you get to your destination. But it doesn't happen that way. If you think about it, things don't go like this. They probably go more something like that. So it's not a straight line for sure. And why it happens? Why do we feel like we're not learning, or even worse, we feel like we're getting worse instead of improving our abilities and skills? It happens because, as I said, the learning process is not a straight line. It has ups, downs, things go well, then they get worse all over again. Then we have to change something. Then we feel like we're getting worse. Then we improve our levels into a new plateau, into a new category, and it feels like we're starting it all over again. And then it's just an ongoing, endless cycle of improvement. But those 4 processes or those 4 parts, they could be explained in an interesting way by this concept. I don't know who created the concept. That's probably a good information that I should have had previously. Okay, apparently it was first created by Martin M. Broadwell's, and it's called the 4 stages of learning. The definition is, it gives us a valuable conceptual framework to understand how we learn anything. And first, when we start to learn something, the first thing that happens is we didn't know that we don't know that until we started. For example, let's suppose you need to learn how to drive, but you never really tried driving before. So you don't really know that you don't know until you try it for the first time. It's not something you're worried about. Like, for example, let's say, think of a language you don't speak, any language. You don't really know how much you don't know until you try to speak it. And that's really cool. That's really interesting because it changes a lot when we take our first step into learning. So it almost feels like we're here, we don't know that we don't know until we try, And when we try, something happens. And this something is not fun. It feels like we fall into into a hole that we didn't know that that hole was there until we stepped in. So we realize that we don't know it, like we know nothing about it. And that's where most of us get frustrated, because we realize that we're actually far away from learning that one thing that we didn't know we don't know. And that second part is terrible, because we feel like we're doing well just because we never tried, until we try it and then we fail, or it feels like we failed. And then those first two parts, they're called, first part is called the unconscious incompetence, which means we are not conscious, we're not aware that we are not capable of doing it. We don't know that we are incompetent to perform that task or to complete that action. So we don't know that we don't know. And then when we try, we fall in the second stage, we called conscious incompetence. Because here we realize that we don't know it. We know nothing about it. And then we feel so lost. We get very frustrated. Most of the time we quit right here. So I would say, like, majority of people that start to do something, to learn something, they will quit right away when they take the very first step and they realize how difficult, how far they are from accomplishing that one goal. And let's just get another example, like we just used driving. A very cool example about that is art in general. We could think about an instrument, for example. We see somebody playing the drums, they're like on fire. They're just hitting all over and just sounding amazing. We're like, oh, that's pretty cool. But we don't know that we don't know how to do it. I mean, we probably know that it's not simple, but when we sit down and we try to replicate or we try to make a few sounds, it's like, wow, how does that guy do it? And a lot of people just give up. Talking about the drums, I gave up myself when I was young. I was probably maybe 10 or 11. And I started learning how to play the drums. I probably had a couple classes, maybe like, I don't know, maybe like 5 or less. But I was just like, man, that's so difficult. It wasn't something that was catching my attention and that I felt was really interesting. So I just stopped there. So if you want to learn something, you have to take the first step into the unknown, into the terrible valley of the incompetence. You will have to be conscious that you don't know. The only way for you to do it is by taking that step and moving forward towards your new goal, the goal you've set for yourself. And if we, like today is January 13, 2023, as we're recording it, it is interesting because probably by this time, we're only 13 days into the new year. And I am very sure, I am positive that a lot of people have already quit their New Year's resolution. Most people don't get to February. Most of the time, it happens because when they see this valley of uncomfort and incompetence because you don't feel good about yourself. When you realize you don't know how to do it, it's not fun, it's not pleasant, it's not amazing, it's not cool. On the contrary, it sucks, it's terrible, it is uncomfortable, it's not nice. You don't want to be bad at anything, or most people don't want to feel that way. So thinking about it, you step in, you realize you don't know it, and then you have two things to do. You can give up in the lowest point of your progress, or you can try to figure out how to learn that one thing. About English, it would be the time where we're learning the basics, we're growing some sort of vocabulary, we are developing or basics of pronunciation, of simple questions and stuff like that. So if you want to get somewhere, if you want to move and achieve something, you have to go through this valley of the conscious incompetence. That's where we realize, like, dang, I don't know it. I don't know how to do it. I wish I knew, but the reality is I did not. And that's where things start to change if you take that leap of faith, if you try it, if you believe that it's possible for you to learn, things could start changing, but only if you continue. Because if you continue, and it's not an overnight thing, just letting you know, this conscious incompetence valley is something that can take a while for you to go through. It will depend mostly in a couple things. First, your intensity, which means how much are you being exposed, or how much have you been practicing this new skill. And also consistency, which means for how long are you doing it? Because being very intense in like for 3 days ain't gonna do the job. But if you're constant, not very, even if your intensity is not like crazy, but if you do it for a year, you'll probably figure it out. So the time it takes will depend mostly on you and on how much you've been exposed and you've been trying to get it. And when you go through this process, we start to see some good things. But they're only possible if we go through the bad things. So once you take the first step on the unconscious incompetence, you realize you don't know when you start to do it. You get to the conscious incompetence process. You will start to see some results. Something will pop up. Some results will start to appear. And that's the phase where we feel like we're crushing. Like, we got it. I have it figured out. I am doing it. It's just like, that's so cool. I remember when I first started learning how to drive, I was too young to drive, but we were in the countryside. My father had a like those Volkswagen Beetles. That was an amazing car, like very old, and just, it was really cool. And we were in this, just like a dirt road, like no houses, nothing around, no cars. And it was only my brother, my father, and myself. And I remember my dad told my brother, like, I'll drive. And for whatever reason, he randomly climbed in the roof, like, of the car. And he was literally like with his chest and his belly in the top of the car. He was laying in the car, holding like his hands nearby the windows, with his face in the front of the car. It was just like amazing. And my father was sitting next to me and just like teaching me how to do stuff, like have to step in the clutch, you have to let it go slowly. You see the car will start to move. So in this meantime, my brother was just hanging in the roof of the car. So in that first day, like I just realized driving wasn't so simple, but I was too young also. But anyway, I realized that. And a little after that, I was like a teenager, and I would only drive when we went to the countryside, those dirt roads, and like nobody, no traffic, nothing around. And I started to drive every time we went there. I would like, we got to the dirt road, my father would swap places with me. We would change the seats and I would drive. And I started to get confident. I was like, oh, I think I figured out this driving thing. But still, I was very, very strict on the things I could do. I wasn't a formed driver. Like I wasn't good at driving. I just knew how to, like the basics. I knew how to do it. But at this point, when we're learning something, it feels like we have it figured out. Like it feels like we are the hero of the thing. Like I got it. Leave it on me. I'll do it. But at this point, uh, we know that we know. That's the called conscious competence, which means we can perform that action, we can do that one thing, only if we think through the process and in a very organized way in our brains, we make it happen. It's almost like doing some math. We can do it, but we have to go through the processes, go through the formulas, understand what's happening, use like the right numbers, follow a specific process. It's not something automatic. And that's the called conscious competence. We know that we know, but we don't do it in a natural way. We're very robotic, if we can say that. And we will get the results, but we will need to think through and make it happen. Just like when I thought I had driving figured out, I still had to think every time I need to change gears. I had to think about it, step in the clutch, think about it, let it go. I mean, just step in the gas. So it was just like a process. But still, we think we have it figured out. And when we realize that we're not that amazing yet, we get hit again by some sort of frustration, because it's almost like, come on, I just had it figured out, and now it feels like I'm not that good. And it only happens to the people that get to the next and last level of this process. This next and last level of the process is called unconscious competence. Unconscious competence is when we don't have to think about what we're doing. We just do it. It's not something we have to process, to think through, to go through the processes, to make an analysis and all of it. No, it's just, we just do it. It's almost like breathing. You don't think, oh, I need to breathe in, breathe out. No, you just do it. You don't think about it. And there are probably some things like related to that in your life. that you do so naturally that you don't have to think about. For example, when I was in the US, I used to play soccer in college, and I grew up playing soccer. Like I love soccer. And just a funny thing, my feet support here is a soccer ball. So if you're just listening, you're not going to see it. But if you're watching the video, you see a soccer ball in your screen. That's where I keep my feet up while working. So it's something that's just part of my life, and it's always been. So when I was in college, I grew up playing soccer. So it's been always like so natural, not because I'm natural talent or nothing like that, but simply because I've been exposed to soccer a lot. And I used to play soccer in the morning at school, in the afternoon, in the soccer team I played at. And at night, I would go to pick up soccers. That would happen probably like 3 times a week, or at least 2 times a week. But every day I would play some sort of soccer at school, on the team I played at, or pick up soccer, either on the streets or at some court or soccer field or something. But I remember when I was in college, I used to, like after practice, it has happened a couple of times. It wasn't an everyday thing. But a few times, some of my friends would ask me things after practice. They'd go like, how did you do that? Like that one thing you did. And I didn't even know what they were talking about. I was like, what thing? Like, what are you talking about? They'd go like, oh, you got the ball and then you turned around. You did this, did that. I was like, I mean, I didn't even see it. So I don't think I'll be capable of explaining what I did, because I don't remember. But the reason why it happened is because I was unconscious of that competence I had, of that ability I had developed. But if I had to go through the steps and do it like in a specific way, let's say I was going to teach people how to do that move they were asking me about, I would have to understand what it was, break it down into some steps in order to teach it. So I would be able to teach, but first I would need to know what it was and break it down into some basic steps to teach. But the point is, what you are natural or what you are familiar with, it's usually something you don't really think about. You just do it. Why? Because you just do it. It's just natural. And it doesn't mean like that it's natural that you are Lionel Messi in soccer, or you are Beethoven and if you're a musician, or you are Leonardo da Vinci if you're an artist. No, it's just you've been exposed to that one thing for so long that you got it figured out. But at some point in this process, you are the guy that didn't know that you don't know it. And everybody has been there. Every one of us. Maybe if it's something you've been exposed to at a very young age, you don't remember this time, but you surely went through it. All of us went through this not knowing that we don't know until we realize we, in fact, don't know it. Happens like from day one of our lives when we're starting to, I don't know, try to say our first words or trying to walk for the first time. We don't remember those things, but we surely didn't know it until we first tried. And even though it was not something that we were thinking through, because we're just little children, still we probably got frustrated like Of course, not like adult frustration, but we're like, oh man, can do it. And then we went through the valley of the conscious incompetence where we struggled, we tried, we failed, about walking for like the first steps, we for sure felt for many times before we were able to finally make it. So the big point here is learning is not a straight line. It has some processes, has some steps, and most importantly, it only happens for those who don't stop, or for the ones that continue. Because if we want to learn it, if you want to learn something or anything, we'll have to do it. And I'm going to give some more examples about it, even though that's like the basic overall concept. We're going to implement it into some other wording and some other examples. And we're also going to read this description from leadershipmanagement.com.au about the 4 stages in the learning process. And it says that the first one, the unconscious incompetence, is when we don't know what we don't know. We don't know that we don't know. And it says, an energetic 2-year-old boy wants to ride a bike that he sees his old brother riding, just like the drum example. But he doesn't know how to ride it. Most of us in business who had never had extensive feedback about our interpersonal skills are at this state of unconscious incompetence. Then we move into number 2, which is conscious incompetence. We know that we don't know. That's a problem. Here we learn that we are not competent at something. This often comes as a rude awakening, which means it's something that hits us very hard. And it's like, wow, that's true. It's just rude awakening. The 2-year-old boy gets on the bike and falls off. He has immediately gone from stage 1 to stage 2 and knows that he doesn't know how to ride a bike. Once he falls, if he continue trying it and if he practices, he gets into phase 3, the conscious competence. We work at what we don't know. So we don't know, and then we start working on it. We improve it. We get it figured out. Here, we consciously make an effort to learn a new skill. Practice, drill, and repetition are at the forefront. This is where most learning takes place. It takes effort and work. The little boy carefully straights and steers and balances and paddles and thinks of what he's doing step by step, which means it is a process you have to consciously think about, go through, process to make it happen. And then we hit the number 4, the unconscious competence. We don't have to think about knowing it. Here, the skill set happens automatically at an unconscious level. The little boy rides his bike without even thinking about it. He can whistle, talk, sing, and do other things with his mind at the same time. It's not a process you have to, in a very organized, mechanic way, go through your mind. It's just natural. It just happens. And another example that we can all probably relate to is driving a car, the example we used in our conversation. The key is to recognize where you are in the 4 stages of learning and be patient with yourself. So that's something really cool. Be patient with yourself. Think about it. So we go through unconscious incompetence, conscious incompetence, that's the valley, the lowest part usually. Then we get to the conscious competence when we can perform the action if we think about it. Then we go to the unconscious competence. We don't have to think, we just do it. The sentences that we can usually define when we are in each of those steps, they're literally like, I don't know. We usually figured out that we were in stage 1 only when we get to stage 2. We go like, oh man, that's so difficult. I didn't know it was that hard. So that's where we realized, like, I don't know how to do it. So we hit step 1 and 2 usually when we take the first step. We go through the first 2 steps. Then we learn how to do it, but we have to think. It's something we have to read the recipe. We have to go through the step by step. We have to consider all the details. We have to think about it and it's something very organized usually in our minds. Some other example with trading like money-related trading. So in the first step, you think trading is easy and you can trade well. When you try it, you realize that you can't and start learning and reading books. You try to get it figured out. Then you have a complete trading system with the right psychology and money management. And with constant practice, you develop discipline. So now you know how to make it. Now you know how to do it, how it works. And then application of the skill is automatic in the 4th phase. You can dance with the market and grow your trading account easily. So you get to the point where you're constantly making analysis, even if you're not thinking about it. Just like, ooh, that's something interesting. So that's nice. We can all relate to that in some situation. Then the next phase or the next example will be another way to define it before we get another example. Actually, I'll leave this one as the last example, as the last part of the thing. Let me move that one over. And let's talk about this example. Those are the 4 learning stages of sales training. So sales is when you sell something. You are a seller. You work providing a service, selling something in the market. And that happens when you have a low performance, like you don't sell good, but you don't know why. So you don't know what I don't know. So you hire like somebody to help in this process. And there is a lack of standards and also expectation. The person doesn't even know what to do or what's expected from them. It could also happen due to incompetent leadership, which it's not always the case, but it could happen. And then when you figured out like this first part, we move into step 2, the conscious incompetence. Expectations hit But at this point, we don't have the training yet. We just have the expectation, like, oh man, now I know what I have to do, but I still can't do it. Then you're unwilling and unable to improve. You cannot do it. Like, you don't know how to, like, all right, I need to be good at it, but how do I even do it? I don't know. Then you have the leadership reviews with results rather than coaching behaviors. At this point, the reviews should be more like towards the way you do it and how to do it, like teaching you the steps, more than the result itself. You have to figure out like how to perform. And then you finally know how it works. Due to the training, you can actually go through the steps and make it happen. So you have training and you practice, but it's still probably, you need to go through it a couple more times. You still forget why you're talking to a client. Sometimes you get lost, like, all right, so what should I do now? Or you have the wrong call, like the wrong decision in the middle of a negotiation. So at this point, you need reminders. You need to have that cheat sheet with you, just in case. But through practice, you hit number 4. That's when you are just unconscious of your ability. That's just like, it's natural. You just sit down to the meeting, in whatever direction it goes, you have the right way to bring it back. You have the right strategies to close it. You nailed it. You got it. Like, you know how to do it. You have an easy delivery, you know, like the right time to slow down in the conversation, to speed up, you know, like the objections will be thrown at you and how you can go through them. You know, like how to handle the situation. You know what client is not ideal for you, so you can probably just finish that one earlier. You know which one is the ideal customer you'd like to have, but you also know how to treat them in the way that they will probably feel the security and the help they need from you. So this is definitely something really, really important. So just two more things we'll go through before we wrap it up. First, so we go unconscious incompetence, conscious incompetence, conscious competence. I know how to do it. And then before we hit that mastery that called second nature, we develop the unconscious competence. We just do it naturally. Another way to look at it is, at first we have the wrong intuition, this unconscious incompetence. We have the wrong intuition, like, or we have no idea on what to do. Usually when we realize we don't know, a sign of it is that we have the wrong analysis. Like we don't really know how it works. And then when we advance, when we move forward to step number 3, we have the right analysis. Like we know how to, like the best steps to take, how to do stuff, like how to move with decisions and stuff like that. And then we hit number 4. That's the right intuition. Intuition is not something that we just learn from a textbook. It comes a lot from experience, from seeing things happening, from trying, from like just trials and errors and mistakes and all of it. So that's usually how it happens, and that's how we usually go through the learning process. That's the hierarchy we go through to develop the competence. And the very last point we'll talk about is about life. Like how do you know, or how do you figure out where you are in this process? As important as knowing how to go through and like knowing that they exist is understanding, like, how do I figure out where I am, and how I can um, move forward. Unless if you want to stay where you are, it's your choice. But I'm sure you can do a lot more than you think. And I'm sure there are things you want to learn, develop, that you hadn't had the chance yet, or you hadn't had the opportunity, or I don't know, just like the reason, or simply the courage. And that's what we're going to talk about before we go. So when you are in this stage number one, that's usually where you feel comfortable. You are at your comfort zone. You feel safe and you feel in control. It's just like, it's easy. It's not something, it's awesome. You're just there. It's like, I'm cool, nothing's bothering me. I don't really have to worry about knowing or not knowing or whatever about this. I'm fine. I'm cool. And then when you realize you wanna, or you need to learn something, to take a step, you go from the comfort zone to the fear zone, and that's not fun. Fear is never a thing that is good to go through. But it's the fear zone because it's the valley of the conscious incompetence. You figured out that you don't know it. And that sucks. That's terrible. Nobody wants to be there. So when you get to this stage, you have no self-confidence. You don't think you're capable of doing it. You don't think it's even possible for you to learn it. I remember the second time I failed in my driving test at the driver's license school. I came home so frustrated. I was like, I don't think I'll ever be able to make it. That was like, I literally thought it. It's like, what if I try 1,000 times and it just never happens? And at this point, we find excuses and we get very driven, and we get worried, and we get just like preoccupied, and we think about what other people will say. And also, that's not good. It's not going to help you in any way. It's not something that will produce any good effect for you. But when you go through this fear, you eliminate the excuses that will try to pull you down. You move forward and you hit the learning zone. And that's where life happens. That's where you face your fears. That's where you try to do what you can. That's where you can dedicate and put in the efforts to make a change, to make the change you need. And that's so important. You have to do it in order for you to move forward in life. If you don't go through this process, if you don't go through the learning, nothing will ever change. Every single human being, like when we're born, we know zero, we know nothing. And if we don't go through the learning process, we will always be in the very same place. Learning is the tool, the bridge that takes us from one place to the next. If we are in the comfort zone, in the fear zone, we are not going to change. Your life will continue the same. Your things, your dreams will be just in the paper. nothing will change, nothing will happen. But if you go through this learning process in this learning zone, you build skills, you will start to be confident about the things you are learning. And when it happens, you develop the conscious competence. And because you're in this process, you're feeling more competent. You are in movement, you're moving. And as the law of physics says, what is moving tends to be moving. So an object in movement tends to be movement. You get to the fourth stage, the unconscious competence, also called the growth zone. That's usually where you achieve your highest level in whatever you do. That's where you start to help others. That's where you start to help other people to go through what you also went yourself. And when you hit this place, you will always have new areas where your unconscious incompetence, and I highly recommend you to always go through it again with a new skill, with a new dream, with a new sport, with a new something. Yes, and once you hit growth zone, remember also that you can always go further. You can always improve. You can always do more. Because if you get to growth zone and you start to improve, to develop, to grow, your skills, they will eventually start to decrease. Your motivation won't be the same. You will just okay, I made it. So I highly recommend you and I encourage you to push further once you hit that growth zone. And that's it. That's episode 65 of Learn and Become podcast, talking about the 4 stages of the learning process. We use some reference like this one from HR Cafe, a website about human resources. We also use some other references taken from Google, and also this one from leadershipmanagement.com.au. So thank you guys for sharing this amazing content online also. And thank you guys for being here, for listening, for watching this episode. If you have any questions, if you have any suggestions, please let us know. Thank you so very much. Take care. And I will see you in the next one.